My name is James, and I never thought my life would change so dramatically on an ordinary Tuesday evening in September. I'm a 28-year-old freelance graphic designer living in Boston, spending most of my days working from my small but cozy apartment in South End. My life was predictable, organized, and maybe a little too safe. Until the night my building's fire alarm went off. I remember being deeply focused on a client project when the piercing sound cut through my concentration. At first, I thought it was just another drill, but the acrid smell of smoke quickly convinced me otherwise. Grabbing only my phone and wallet, I joined the stream of residents heading down the emergency stairwell. That's when I first saw him, firefighter James Lucas, though I wouldn't learn his name until later. He was directing people toward the exit, his strong voice carrying over the chaos. Even through the smoke and confusion, I couldn't help but notice his commanding presence. He was tall, probably around 62, with broad shoulders that filled out his firefighting gear impressively. Our eyes met briefly as I passed him, and despite the urgency of the situation, time seemed to slow for a moment. His eyes were an intense green, striking against his soot-smudged face. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder, guiding me toward the exit. "This way, sir," he said, his voice deep and reassuring. "Watch your step." It turned out that the fire had started in one of the apartments 2 floors below mine. While the damage was contained, we weren't allowed back into the building until the fire department completed their investigation. As we all gathered in the street, I found myself watching James work. He moved with purpose and confidence, coordinating with his team and checking on residents. An hour later, when things had calmed down and most residents had found places to stay for the night, I was still standing there, unsure where to go. My family lived on the West Coast, and while I had friends in the city, I felt awkward about calling so late. James approached me, having shed his heavy outer gear. He was wearing a navy FDNY t-shirt that showed off his athletic build, and despite the late hour and obvious exhaustion, he still looked remarkable. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "I'm working on it," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He studied me for a moment, then pulled out a card from his pocket. "There's a hotel about 2 blocks from here that works with the fire department. They offered displaced residents a discounted rate." He wrote something on the back of the card. "Show them this and tell them firefighter Lucas sent you." Our fingers brushed as he handed me the card, and I felt that same electric connection from earlier. He held my gaze a moment longer than necessary, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. "Interest, perhaps." "Thank you," I said, looking down at the card. In addition to the hotel information, he'd written his badge number and what looked like a phone number in case you need anything. He explained, a slight smile playing at his lips. "For the incident report, of course." I tried to ignore the way my heart raced as I tucked the card into my pocket. The hotel turned out to be a charming boutique establishment, and true to Ezra word, they gave me a significant discount. After seeing his note that night lying in the unfamiliar bed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I kept replaying our brief interactions, analyzing every word, every look. The phone number on the card seemed to burn a hole in my pocket. The next morning, I received clearance to return to my apartment. The damage was Minimal on my floor, mostly just the lingering smell of smoke as I settled back into my routine. I found myself staring at Ezra card more times than I'd care to admit. 3 days later, I finally worked up the courage to send him a text. Hi, this is Daniel from the fire at Carlton Apartments. I wanted to thank you again for your help with the hotel. His response came surprisingly quickly. Glad I could help. How's the apartment? We exchanged a few more messages, each one making my heart beat a little faster. Then came the message that changed everything. I'm actually doing a safety inspection in your building tomorrow. Maybe I could stop by and check your smoke detectors. Around 2 p.m. I tried to tell myself it was just part of his job, but something in the way he'd written it suggested otherwise. I agreed and spent the next day nervously cleaning my apartment and changing my outfit 3 times. At exactly 2 p.m. there was a knock at my door. James stood there in his uniform pants and a fitted department polo shirt that highlighted his broad chest and strong arms. His dark hair was slightly TZZ and he had a 500 shadow that made him look even more handsome than I remembered. Hi, he said, smiling warmly. Mind if I come in? I stepped aside to let him enter, trying not to stare too obviously as he moved through my space. He did actually check the smoke detectors, but I noticed his inspection was rather thorough, including areas that definitely didn't have any fire safety equipment. You're an artist? He asked, pausing at my desk where several sketches were spread out. Graphic designer, I corrected, moving closer. These are for a client's rebranding project. They're really good, he said, turning to face me. We were standing closer than strictly necessary, and I could smell a hint of his cologne, something woodsy and masculine. Thanks, I managed to say, very aware of his proximity. Do you always do such thorough inspections? A slight smile played at his lips. Only for the interesting cases. Am I an interesting case? Very. His green eyes held mine. Fact, I was wondering if you'd like to get coffee sometime to discuss fire safety. Of course. I couldn't help but laugh. Of course, just fire safety. Well, he stepped slightly closer. Maybe not just fire safety. The air between us crackled with tension for a moment. I thought he might kiss me right there, but instead he pulled back slightly. Tomorrow there's a great coffee shop around the corner from the station, say 11:00 a.m. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I'd like that. After he left, I sat down at my desk, unable to focus on work. I had a date with a firefighter, an incredibly attractive kind, possibly interested in me firefighter. The next day couldn't come fast enough. The coffee shop, as it turned out, was a cozy little place called the Daily Grind. I arrived 10 minutes early, nervously adjusting my blue button-down shirt in the windows reflection. James walked in exactly on time, looking devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a grey Henley that showed off his athletic build. Hey, he said, his face lighting up when he saw me. Hope you haven't been waiting long. We ordered our drinks, an Americano for him, a latte for me, and found a quiet table in the corner. Up close, I noticed a small scar above his right eyebrow, adding character to his already striking features. So he began, when you're not having firefighters inspect your apartment, what do you like to do? The conversation flowed easily. I told him about my work, my love for art and design, and how I'd moved to Boston from Seattle 3 years ago. He shared stories about Growing up in a family of firefighters, his father and older brother were both in the department too. It's kind of a family legacy, he explained, his eyes brightening as he talked about his work. But I love it, every day is different, and being able to help people, he shrugged it, makes everything worth it, even the late night calls. I asked, thinking back to the night we met, especially those, he said, giving me a meaningful look. Sometimes they led to meeting interesting people. Time flew by, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. As we walked out of the coffee shop, James seemed hesitant to end our time together. I know this great Italian place a few blocks away, he said. Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night? I'd love to. He walked me to my car, and this time he didn't hold back. As we reached the vehicle, he gently turned me around, one hand coming up to cut my face. I've been wanting to do this since I first saw you, he murmured before leaning in to kiss me. His lips were soft but confident, and I melted into the kiss, my hands gripping his shirt. He tasted like coffee, in something uniquely him, and when he finally pulled back, we were both slightly breathless. Tomorrow night, he said, his voice husky, I'll pick you up at 7. The next evening, James arrived right on time, looking incredible in a navy blazer and white shirt. The restaurant was intimate and romantic, with hand-laid tables and soft Italian music playing in the background over plates of handmade pasta. We shared more about ourselves. I learned that despite his tough exterior, James was deeply passionate about literature and could quote Shakespeare. He told me about his most challenging rescues, and I shared stories about my most demanding clients. Can I ask you something, he said, as we shared a tiramisu that night at your building. Did you feel it too, that connection? I nodded, my heart rate racing. Yes, I thought I was imagining it. You weren't, he said softly, reaching across the table to take my hand. I actually volunteered to do that safety inspection just to see you again, really. Though I did actually check your smoke detector safety first. He winked. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront, our hands linked together. The night was cool, and when I shivered slightly, James immediately shrugged off his blazer and draped it over my shoulders. Such a gentle, I teased, though I was touched by the gesture. I try, he smiled, pulling me closer, though I have to admit my thoughts about you aren't always gentlemanly. The weeks that followed were like something out of a dream, James and I fell into an easy rhythm, working around his 24-hour shifts at the firehouse. On his days off, we explored the city together, finding hidden restaurants and quiet corners where we could just be us. One particular evening, about a month into our relationship, James invited me to visit him at the firehouse during his shift. I brought dinner for his whole crew, something I learned was a sure way to win their approval. The other firefighters welcomed me warmly, though I caught knowing smiles and whispered comments. Clearly James had been talking about me. The thought made my heart flutter. So you're the reason Lucas's been walking around with that dopey smile, teased one of his colleagues. A burly man named Mike. Leave him alone, James said, but he was smiling as he wrapped an arm around my waist. The crew's easy acceptance meant more than I could express in this traditionally masculine environment. No one batted an eye at our relationship. If anything, they seemed delighted to see their colleagues so happy. Later that evening, James gave me a tour of the station in the quiet of the truck bay, surrounded by the Impressive fire engines, he pulled me. Close, thank you for coming tonight, he said softly. It means a lot to have you here, even though your colleagues are determined to embarrass you with stories. Even then he laughed, then grew serious. So you know I've never brought anyone here before, never wanted to before I could respond. The alarm blared through the station. James immediately switched into professional mode, but he took a moment to kiss me quickly. I have to go, I'll call you when I'm off shift, I nodded, watching as he efficiently donned his gear and jumped onto the truck as they roared out of the station, sirens blaring. I felt a mix of pride and concern. This was his life rushing toward danger, while others ran away, and I was falling for him. Complicated schedule, and all the next few weeks brought us closer. James started keeping spare clothes at my apartment, and I found myself spending more time at his place, a cozy brownstone he'd inherited from his grandmother. We developed little traditions: coffee in bed on his days off, Sunday morning runs along the Charles River, though he always had to slow down from me, and quiet evenings cooking together. One rainy Saturday, about 2 months into our relationship, we were curled up on his couch watching old movies when he suddenly muted the TV. Dan, he said, using the nickname only he called me. I need to tell you something. My heart skipped. Okay, he shifted to face me, his expression serious. I know it might seem fast, but I'm falling in love with you. Actually, that's not true. He took a deep breath. I've already fallen in love with you. The world seemed to stop. I looked into his green eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and vulnerability there. I love you too, I whispered the words, feeling both momentous and completely natural. His face broke into that brilliant smile I'd come to adore, and he pulled me into a deep kiss. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Move in with me, he said softly. This place is too big for just me, and I want to wake up with you every morning. I'm not at the station. Are you sure? I asked, my heart racing at his proposition. It's a big step. I've never been more sure of anything, he replied, taking my hands in his. These past 2 months have shown me exactly what I want, and it's you here with me. 2 weeks later, I was moving my belongings into James' brownstone. The process of combining our lives was surprisingly smooth. His minimalist style complemented my more artistic tendencies, and we quickly found ways to merge our spaces. My design books found a home next to his firefighting manuals, and my artwork added color to his walls. The first real test of our relationship came a month after I moved in. James was called to a major warehouse fire, one that made the evening news. I sat glued to the TV watching footage of the massive blaze, knowing he was somewhere in there. The hours dragged by with no word from him. Finally, at 3:00 a.m., he came home. His face was smudged with soot, and he moved slowly, clearly exhausted. Without a word, I helped him out of his clothes and into the shower, where I washed away the remnants of smoke and fear. I lost someone today, he said quietly as we lay in bed afterward, his voice rough. We couldn't get to them in time. I held him closer, feeling his body shake slightly as he finally let his professional facade crack. That night showed me another side of James, the vulnerable man behind the brave firefighter, and I fell even more deeply in love with him. Spring turned to summer, and our life together settled into a comfortable rhythm. We hosted dinner parties for both his crew and my artist friends, creating An eclectic but wonderful chosen family. Ezra parents initially hesitant about our relationship grew to accept us after seeing how happy their son was. One warm evening in July, James suggested a walk through the public garden. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as we strolled hand in hand near the bridge over the Swan Pond. He suddenly stopped. "Remember when you asked me if I was sure about moving in together?" he said, turning to face me. I nodded, puzzled by his serious tone. "Well, now I have another question for you, and I've never been more sure about anything in my life." My breath caught as he dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "James, you walked into my life during a fire, and you've been lighting up my world ever since. Every day with you makes me a better person, a better firefighter, a better man. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant platinum band. Tears blurred my vision as I nodded emphatically yes. I managed to say yes, absolutely yes. The ring slid perfectly onto my finger, and James stood to kiss me deeply as scattered applause broke out from nearby park goers who had witnessed the proposal. "I love you," he whispered against my lips. "Even when I'm running into burning buildings, my heart is always running home to you." The wedding planning brought its own set of challenges and joys. We decided on a fall ceremony, choosing a restored historical firehouse that had been converted into an event space, a perfect blend of our worlds. Ezra fellow firefighters insisted on creating a water cannon salute for us to walk through, a traditional firefighter wedding custom. The day itself dawned clear and crisp, perfect October weather. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my charcoal gray seat suit when Mike, Ezra best friend from the station, poked his head in ready to go. "Dan, your firefighters waiting." James looked breathtaking in his dress uniform, metals gleaming on his chest. When our eyes met, as I walked down the aisle, I saw tears glistening in his green eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he took mine. Our vows were personal and heartfelt. James spoke about how saving lives had always been his calling, but he never expected that responding to a routine fire alarm would lead him to the love of his life. I talked about how he not only rescued me from a burning building, but had also shown me what true courage and love looked like. James Lucas, take you, James, to be my husband," he said, his voice strong and sure. "I promise to love and protect you, to be your shelter in every storm, and to always find my way home to you no matter what fires I have to walk through." The reception was a beautiful chaos of traditions from both our worlds. The firefighters performed their ceremonial customs while my artist friends had created an incredible multimedia installation celebrating our love story. Ezra, father who had been initially uncertain about our relationship, gave a touching speech about how love knows no boundaries and how proud he was to welcome me to the family. As we danced our first dance to At Last by Etta James, I rested my head on his shoulder. "Happy," he murmured into my ear. "More than I ever thought possible," I replied later that night as we drove away from the reception under another water cannon salute. James squeezed my hand. "You know," he said, "that fire alarm that brought us together wasn't actually a coincidence." I turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" he grinned sheepishly. "Remember Mrs. Henderson from 4B? She was cooking and burned something. She could have just opened her windows But she knew I was working that night and pulled the alarm instead. She'd been trying to set me up for months. I laughed in disbelief. Are you saying our entire relationship is because of a meddling neighbor with burned cookies? Hey, firefighters know better than anyone. Sometimes the best things come from unexpected sparks. Now, as I write this, from our home office watching James in the garden through the window, I can't help but smile. He's teaching our recently adopted rescue dog Spark to fetch, still in his uniform after his shift. 5 years have passed since that fire alarm, and every day I fall more in love with my firefighter. Life isn't always perfect. I still worry every time he goes on a call, and his schedule can be challenging, but I wouldn't change it for anything, because sometimes the best love stories start with a fire alarm, and the bravest hearts aren't just the ones who run into burning buildings, but the ones who choose to love despite the risks. James catches me watching and waves that brilliant smile, still making my heart skip a beat. Tonight we'll have dinner with his crew. Tomorrow we'll continue planning our next adventure, and through it all, we'll face whatever fires life brings together, 'cause that's what love is, not the absence of flames, but finding someone worth walking through them with. And I found my firefighter, my hero, my heart's home.